A little black girl was humiliated in a luxurious party, but everybody regretted when they met her father. In a lavish mansion, the Villanueva family's gala was in full swing. Delicate lights adorned the garden, and classical music filled the air. Among the guests, Marta and her 10-year-old daughter, Louisa, tried to remain unnoticed. Marta worked as a domestic employee for the Villanuevas and had been reluctantly invited. Little did they know, their biggest ordeal was about to unfold when a group of children playing near a fountain invited little Louisa to join them. Timidly, Louisa approached, hoping to make friends, but her presence was met with disdain. "She doesn't belong here," Fernando sneered, his eyes raking over Louisa's simple dress. "You're not like us." Louisa stepped back, tears welling up in her eyes. Marta, seeing this, hurried to her daughter's side. "What's going on here?" she asked, trying to stay calm despite her growing anger. Before Fernando could reply, Mrs. Laura Villanueva intervened. "Your daughter is bothering the other children. This is not a party for people like her." Marta felt the sting of humiliation but replied with a trembling, dignified voice. "What do you mean by people like her? Why don't you say it to my face?" Her words cut through the air, but before the situation could escalate further, Don Alvaro, the patriarch, stepped in. "If you're going to cause problems, I'll ask you to leave." The tension grew, and all eyes were on Marta and Louisa, who had done nothing wrong. As they moved towards the exit, an elderly man entered the mansion. His presence commanded respect. It was Don Ramon, a powerful businessman and, unknown to many, the real boss of Don Alvaro. Seeing Marta and Louisa in tears, Don Ramon's expression hardened. "What's going on here?" His voice echoed, stopping Marta in her tracks. Don Alvaro, pale at the sight of Don Ramon, tried to explain, but words failed him. Laura quickly intervened. These two were causing a scene. Don Ramon looked at Louisa, then at Marta, and finally at the Villanuevas. "That girl is my granddaughter," he declared firmly, leaving the room in stunned silence. The impact of his words was like thunder on a clear night. Don Alvaro and Laura exchanged panicked glances as the guests whispered among themselves, shock evident on every face. "Alvaro, we need to talk," Don Ramon said, his eyes fixed on the man who had been his subordinate for years. Alvaro's legs trembled at the thought of what his boss might do. Marta and Louisa, still tearful but now with a glimmer of hope, stood by as Don Ramon's revelation shifted the night's events. The room fell into a tense silence as Don Ramon guided Alvaro to a more private corner. Marta, holding Luisa's hand, watched the interaction, noting how Alvaro's face turned increasingly pale. "Alvaro, you've worked for me for years, and I never imagined you would allow my own granddaughter to be humiliated in your house," Don Ramon said, his calm demeanor contrasting with the severity of his words. Alvaro swallowed hard, trying to formulate a response. "Don Ramon, I didn't know Louisa was your granddaughter. If I had known, then your behavior would have been different?" Don Ramon's voice rose slightly. "Is it necessary to know my connections to treat a child with respect?" Alvaro had no response. Beside him, Laura Villanueva tried to intervene but was stopped cold by Don Ramon's glare. Meanwhile, the guests began to murmur among themselves, the atmosphere thick with unspoken tensions and unanswered questions. Taking advantage of the moment, Marta addressed the gathering. "I hope tonight teaches us all a lesson about respect and the dignity every person deserves, regardless of their background or status." After a tense deliberation, Don Ramon returned to the center of the room with Marta and Louisa by his side. The music had stopped, and all eyes were on him. "Tonight has been revealing for all of us," he began, his voice steady. "Not only have we seen a lack of compassion, but also the strength of a mother and the courage of a child. Louisa, my granddaughter, has shown more dignity tonight than many here present." He turned to Alvaro and Laura. "I hope you reflect deeply on what happened. I expect not only apologies but actions to remedy the harm caused. My support for this family will be reconsidered in light of these events." Alvaro nodded, the gravity of the situation finally settling in. "We will do what's necessary to make this right, Don Ramon, not just because of our professional relationship, but because it's the right thing to do." Relieved but still cautious, Marta hugged Louisa, who clung to her mother for comfort. Although the night had started with humiliation, it ended with a promise of change and redemption. What Alvaro, Laura, and everyone who humiliated little Louisa didn't know was that from that moment on, the worst retribution they could have ever imagined was about to descend upon them. Their lives, filled with luxury and disdain for the less fortunate, were about to change in ways they could never have predicted. The morning after the gala, Alvaro sat in his study, his mind racing to find a way to turn the situation to his advantage. The public humiliation by Don Ramon had been a severe blow to his pride and position. He called an urgent meeting with his closest circle of advisors, all carefully selected for their loyalty and cunning. "We need a strategy to handle this," Alvaro said, his voice tense as he pounded the table for emphasis. "We can't let Don Ramon dictate how we run our family or our business." Laura, feeding the conspiratorial atmosphere, suggested, "What if we find something to use against Don Ramon? Something that will make him think twice before intervening in our affairs again." One of the advisors, a shrewd and calculating man, proposed, "We could discreetly investigate his past. Everyone has skeletons in their closet, even Don Ramon." Alvaro, a mix of revulsion and enthusiasm for the idea, nodded. "Do it. Find something we can use. I won't let this incident be the end of our influence." Meanwhile, Marta was taking steps to strengthen her position and ensure that the foundation was not just a symbolic gesture. She knew Alvaro might try to undermine her efforts, especially given the impact of the previous night. She called a meeting with potential allies and sponsors, explaining the mission and need for the foundation. "This foundation is not just a response to a night of humiliation," Marta explained to the room full of potential collaborators. "It's a long-term commitment to changing how our community understands and addresses discrimination and exclusion." One attendee, an influential businessman, asked, "How do you plan to ensure that the foundation has the impact you promise, especially if you face opposition?" "With transparency, accountability, and collaboration. We're not here to make enemies, but to build bridges. However, we are prepared to stand firm against anyone who tries to derail us," Marta said, her tone resilient and determined, resonating with many in the room. Alvaro, with Laura's discreet support, greenlit a deep investigation into Don Ramon's past. They hired a private investigator who began digging through old records and lesser-known connections, looking for any hint of wrongdoing or scandal that could be used against him. A few weeks later, the investigator called Alvaro and Laura to a secret night meeting at a secluded location. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation as the investigator laid out documents and photos on the table. "I found something that might interest you," he said, pointing to a series of financial transactions and dubious associations from decades ago. "It's not recent, but it could question Don Ramon's integrity if made public." Alvaro examined the documents, his face lighting up with a cunning smile. "This is exactly what we needed. What's your price?" "I just want to ensure that Don Ramon gets what he deserves," the investigator replied, his voice filled with bitterness. With the documents in hand, Alvaro returned home and discussed the next move with Laura. They decided it was time to act, planning to leak the information just before the next major shareholders meeting of Don Ramon's company, maximizing the impact and disruption. As Alvaro schemed, Marta was well aware of the escalating conflict. In a meeting with the foundation's board, she shared her concerns about potential reprisals from Alvaro and the need to be prepared for any eventuality. "We must be ready to defend not just Don Ramon, but also the integrity of our mission," Marta explained, her determination palpable. Louisa, though young, felt increasingly involved in her family's struggles. Watching her mother, she decided she wanted to play a more active role. "Mom, I want to help. Maybe I can speak at the next public meeting to show that the foundation is really changing lives." Marta smiled at her daughter's courage. "Of course, Louisa. Your voice is as important as anyone else's. Together, we can face anything Alvaro throws at us." As Louisa prepared for a more visible role and Marta strengthened her alliances, the foundation became a beacon of hope and resilience. However, the looming storm threatened to test their strength and unity like never before. Tensions reached a boiling point when Marta discovered a dark secret that fueled Don Ramon's resentment. During a high-stakes meeting with top executives, Marta decided to confront Don Ramon publicly. "Don Ramon, it's time for the truth to come out," Marta said, her voice firm but filled with restrained emotion. Don Ramon, anticipating this moment, nodded with a resigned air. "You're right, Marta. Everyone deserves to know what really happened." Marta revealed that Don Ramon had made financial and personal decisions years ago that, while not illegal, had significantly harmed Marta's mother and caused their separation. The revelation shocked everyone present, creating a tense and expectant atmosphere. "I did what I thought was best at the time, but I see now how much pain I caused," Don Ramon admitted with an unprecedented sincerity. "Marta, I never intended for you to suffer for my mistakes." The public confession left the board in stunned silence. Though moved by Don Ramon's honesty, Marta knew this was just the beginning of a deeper reconciliation. "It's not just me who deserves an apology, Don Ramon. Many people were affected by your decisions. But today, I'm willing to work with you to repair the damage," Marta responded, her voice soft but resolute. As Marta and Don Ramon worked towards healing, a new conflict arose when Marta joined Don Ramon's company. The employees, accustomed to a rigid hierarchy, did not accept her new role easily. Subordinates ignored her orders, and superiors pressured her with unrealistic expectations. "We need results, Marta. We can't afford to wait," one department head said condescendingly. Maintaining her composure, Marta replied, "Results will come when everyone in this company learns to work together and respect leadership, no matter where it comes from." The internal resistance grew, and Marta found herself fighting on multiple fronts. One exhausting afternoon, she confronted Don Ramon in his office. "I can't keep doing this, Ramon. If you don't change the company culture, they will destroy me, and you, and everything you've built," Marta said, her voice breaking under the strain. Seeing the toll the conflict was taking on Marta, Don Ramon pledged his full support. "You're right, Marta. I'll do whatever it takes to change things. I won't let them destroy you or our family." Don Ramon's company faced an unexpected crisis when a series of bad decisions by now-fired corrupt executives left the company on the brink of bankruptcy. The news leaked to the press, and the business community watched with morbid curiosity. In an emergency meeting, Don Ramon, Marta, and the company's top leaders sat around a conference table, their faces marked by worry. "We must act quickly if we want to save the company," Don Ramon said, his voice tense but determined. Marta, reviewing financial documents, pointed out the critical areas. "We need an immediate restructuring plan, but more importantly, we need to unite as a team. If we can't work together, this will all be in vain." Despite the ongoing internal resistance, the urgency of the situation forced some to reconsider their positions. However, one of the most influential leaders, Joaquin, openly expressed his doubts. "Why should we follow you, Marta? You lack the experience to handle a crisis of this magnitude," Joaquin said defiantly. Looking directly at Joaquin, Marta responded with renewed firmness. "I may lack experience, but I have the determination and support of Don Ramon. More importantly, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to save this company and protect the jobs of thousands of people." Don Ramon stepped in to support Marta. "Joaquin, if you can't work under Marta's leadership, maybe you should reconsider your position here. This crisis requires all of us, and there's no room for doubts or divisions." Don Ramon's declaration made it clear that loyalty and cooperation were now expected and required. The tension and drama within the company were palpable, but the leadership was determined to face the crisis with courage and unity. As Marta and Don Ramon worked tirelessly to implement the restructuring plan, the days blurred into nights without rest, and every decision was crucial. Initially reluctant, employees began to see Marta's dedication and sacrifice, gradually changing some attitudes. In the midst of the restructuring, Marta and Don Ramon faced an unexpected blow. A twist in the corporate crisis revealed betrayals within Don Ramon's close circle. Anonymous documents and emails started arriving, revealing that some of the most trusted executives were colluding to undermine the restructuring efforts. One afternoon, Marta was reviewing reports when an anonymous email arrived in her inbox. The unknown sender had attached incriminating evidence against several senior executives. With her heart racing, Marta took the evidence to Don Ramon. "Look at this, Ramon. We're not only fighting an external crisis, but also internal enemies, Marta said, her voice filled with indignation. Don Ramon, seeing the evidence, felt a mix of betrayal and anger. I can't believe this is happening. These people have been with me for years. They decided to call an urgent meeting with the accused executives. The tension in the boardroom was palpable, each gaze loaded with suspicion and distrust. We have conclusive evidence that some of you have been working against the company's interests, Don Ramon began, his voice firm. This is unacceptable. One of the accused, Manuel, tried to defend himself. This is a misunderstanding. There's no betrayal, just poor decisions and misunderstandings. Holding up the documents, Marta confronted him directly. These emails are not a misunderstanding. They're evidence of a deliberate betrayal. How can you justify this? The room fell silent, the accused unable to provide convincing answers. Don Ramon made a drastic but necessary decision. Manuel and all implicated are fired effective immediately. I will not allow these betrayals to destroy what we've built. The news of the mass firing spread quickly, causing a mix of relief and fear among employees. Meanwhile, Marta and Don Ramon knew the battle was far from over. With the traitors expelled, Don Ramon's company began to stabilize slowly. Marta assumed an even more decisive role, proving her ability to lead with a firm hand. However, this ascent did not go unnoticed by Alvaro, who saw Marta's success as a direct threat to his power. Furious over recent events, Alvaro convened a secret meeting with Laura and his closest allies at his mansion. We can't let Marta and Don Ramon win this battle. If we let them continue, we'll lose everything we've built, Alvaro declared, his voice seething with barely contained hatred. Laura, always shrewd, suggested, we need a strike that leaves them breathless, something that completely destroys their credibility. Maybe we can use Marta's past to our advantage, something that makes them look incompetent and dishonest. Alvaro nodded, a sinister smile forming on his lips. Perfect. Let's organize a social event, a kind of trap where we can humiliate Marta. If we expose any weakness, her fall will be inevitable. Laura used her network of contacts to organize a luxurious charity event, inviting Marta as the keynote speaker, unaware it was a carefully planned trap. On the night of the event, Marta arrived with Louisa, both elegantly dressed and ready to represent the foundation. As Marta approached the stage for her speech, Alvaro and Laura awaited the right moment. During Marta's speech, Laura abruptly interrupted, pretending there was an emergency. Excuse me, but before continuing, I think it's important everyone knows the truth about Marta, Laura said, holding a folder of forged documents. The audience fell silent, expectant. Laura began reading, distorting facts and sowing doubts about Marta's integrity. Here is proof that Marta has manipulated foundation funds for personal gain. Surprised but maintaining her composure, Marta approached Laura. This is a lie. All funds are audited and transparent. This is a vile, baseless accusation. However, the seed of doubt had been planted. Murmurs grew, and some attendees began to leave, distrustful. This won't end here, Alvaro, Marta said, facing Alvaro with fire in her eyes. I won't let you destroy my reputation or the foundation with your lies. Alvaro smirked with disdain. We'll see how long you can stand, Marta. This is just the beginning. Marta and Louisa, shaken by the ambush, left the event with their heads held high, determined to fight the lies and restore the truth. The next day, newspapers and social media were filled with sensational headlines about the accusations against Marta. The foundation's and Marta's reputations were in jeopardy. At Don Ramon's mansion, Marta, Louisa, and Don Ramon gathered to discuss the next steps. Marta, her eyes red from exhaustion and frustration, looked at Don Ramon and Louisa. We can't let these lies destroy us. We need to act quickly to clear our name. Don Ramon, though worried, showed his unwavering support. Marta, we've faced crises before, and we'll do it again. But we need a clear strategy. Louisa, with an unexpected determination for her age, intervened. We can use social media to tell our truth. Show all the evidence of the foundation's transparency and expose Alvaro's and Laura's lies. Marta nodded, seeing the logic in her daughter's words. You're right, Louisa. We can't rely solely on traditional media. We need to reach the people directly. Marta and her team got to work immediately, gathering all the necessary evidence to demonstrate the foundation's transparency. They decided to do a live broadcast where Marta and Louisa would speak directly to the public, exposing the lies and presenting irrefutable evidence. On the night of the broadcast, Marta and Louisa sat in front of the camera, surrounded by documents and charts that proved their management's veracity. The tension was palpable, but the determination on their faces was unwavering. "Good evening," Marta began, her voice firm. "Today, I want to speak to you directly, without intermediaries. The accusations made against us are completely false, and we're here to prove it." Louisa took over, showing graphs and documents. "Here are the complete audits of the last few years. Every donation, every expense, everything is documented and transparent. We have nothing to hide." As they spoke, comments on social media began to change. People who had initially doubted started to see the truth behind the accusations. But the moment of greatest tension came when Marta decided to confront Alvaro and Laura directly. "Alvaro, Laura, I know you're watching this. You know everything you've said is a lie, and I won't rest until justice is served. You will have to face the consequences of your actions." The live broadcast was a success, and support began to return slowly. However, Marta knew the fight was far from over. Alvaro and Laura wouldn't back down easily. With the live broadcast gaining traction and changing public perception, Alvaro and Laura realized their plan was beginning to crumble. They decided to take drastic measures. They called a secret meeting with some of the fired employees, offering rewards in exchange for false testimonies that could further damage Marta and the foundation. In a dark room, Alvaro addressed the group. "We need you to testify against Marta. Say she manipulated funds and abused her power. If you cooperate, there will be benefits for all of you." One of the ex-employees, a man named Ricardo, hesitated. "This is very risky. If we get caught, the consequences will be severe." Laura, with a cold smile, responded, "Don't worry. We have contacts who can ensure your testimonies are taken seriously. Think about what you stand to gain." Ricardo and the others agreed, and the plan was set in motion. However, one of the employees, Carla, troubled by her conscience, decided to contact Marta in secret. Marta received an anonymous call while in her office reviewing documents. The voice on the other end was low and nervous. "Marta, it's Carla, one of the employees fired by Don Ramon. I need to talk to you. There's something you need to know." Intrigued and a bit frightened, Marta agreed to meet Carla in a nearby park. When she arrived, she saw Carla sitting on a bench, visibly nervous. "Thank you for coming, Marta. I can't go through with this. Alvaro and Laura are planning to use false testimonies to ruin you. They offered money to several of us to lie about you and the foundation." Marta felt a mix of relief and rage. "Carla, are you willing to testify against them? We need proof to dismantle their plan." Carla nodded, though visibly scared. "Yes, I'm willing. I can't let these lies destroy lives." Marta and Carla devised a plan to record a confession and present it as evidence. The tension was high, and any mistake could be catastrophic. They decided to arrange a fake meeting with Alvaro, where Carla would wear a hidden microphone. The meeting took place in a discreet restaurant. Carla, nervous but determined, met Alvaro, who suspected nothing. During their conversation, Carla managed to get Alvaro to admit his manipulation plan. "All you have to do is follow the script. We'll take care of the rest," Alvaro said, unaware that every word was being recorded. That night, Marta and Carla brought the recording to Don Ramon, who, upon hearing it, decided it was time to act. "This is enough to destroy them, Marta. Let's take this to the authorities and clear your name once and for all." The revelation of the betrayal and the new turn of events added a layer of intrigue and danger to the already tense situation. Marta knew the battle was far from over, but now she had a crucial advantage. With the recording in hand, Don Ramon and Carla went to the authorities to present the evidence of Alvaro and Laura's conspiracy. The prosecutor's office was bustling with activity, but the prosecutor, intrigued by the case, received them immediately. "This is very serious," the prosecutor said, listening to the recording. "We can use this evidence to open a formal investigation against Alvaro and Laura." "Grateful," Marta responded, We want justice not only for ourselves, but for everyone they've manipulated and harmed. Meanwhile, at Alvaro's mansion, the atmosphere was tense. Laura, aware that their plan could fail, was paranoid. An unexpected call from the prosecutor confirmed their worst fears. Mr. Alvaro, Mrs. Laura, we're opening an official investigation into the accusations against you. I advise you to prepare to cooperate. Alvaro hung up, his face pale with rage. This can't be happening. We need a strategy, and fast. In court, tensions reached their peak. Marta and Don Ramon, accompanied by their legal team, faced Alvaro and Laura, who tried to maintain their composure. Carla's recording was played before the court, and the silence was deafening. It's clear that Alvaro and Laura attempted to manipulate the truth and damage Marta and Don Ramon's reputation, the prosecutor declared. This cannot be tolerated in our society. Desperate, Alvaro tried one last move. This is a setup. Everything was manipulated, he shouted, pointing at Marta and Don Ramon. The judge, unfazed, responded, Mr. Alvaro, the evidence presented is conclusive. You will face the consequences of your actions. With the overwhelming evidence against them, the verdict was swift and decisive. Alvaro and Laura were found guilty of conspiracy and defamation. The sentence included significant compensation for Marta and the foundation, as well as a prison term. With Alvaro and Laura out of the picture, attention returned to Marta and Don Ramon. The community, seeing the injustice they had faced, rallied in support. The foundation began receiving donations and volunteers like never before. During a foundation board meeting, Marta expressed her gratitude and renewed vision. We've been through a lot, but this has only made us stronger. Now, more than ever, we must focus on our mission of inclusion and justice. Louisa, who had been a silent but constant force throughout the ordeal, took the floor. Mom, I'm so proud of you and all of us. We've shown that truth and justice always prevail. Emotionally moved, Don Ramon added, Marta, Louisa, what we've achieved together is extraordinary. But this is just the beginning. We have a bright future ahead, full of possibilities. The room filled with applause and optimism. The revitalized foundation became a symbol of resilience and hope for the community. Though Alvaro and Laura were behind bars, the echo of their vengeance had not ended. One of Alvaro's partners, a dark and vengeful man named Ricardo, vowed to avenge his friend's downfall. Knowing Don Ramon and Marta's weaknesses, he was determined to use that information against them. One night, Marta received an anonymous call. Be careful. Not all enemies have been defeated, a somber voice said before abruptly hanging up. Worried, Marta met with Don Ramon and Louisa to discuss the threat. We can't let our guard down. We have to be prepared for anything, Marta said, her face reflecting the tension. The evening started like any other. Marta, busy in the foundation's office, reviewed financial reports when she received a call from Louisa's school. The voice on the other end was tense and worried. Mrs. Marta, Louisa hasn't been picked up by her usual transport and isn't at school. We've tried calling her, but there's no answer. Marta's heart stopped for a moment. Without losing a second, she called Don Ramon, who immediately activated his contacts in private security and the police. Shortly after, Marta received a text message from an unknown number. If you want to see your daughter again, drop all charges against Alvaro and Laura. The message was clear and terrifying. Marta felt a mix of fear and anger. She knew she couldn't give in to blackmail, but also knew that every minute counted. She showed the message to Don Ramon, who frowned as he read it. This is the work of someone desperate, Don Ramon said, his voice full of concern. We need to act quickly and make sure we protect not only my reputation, but also the foundation. In the mansion, the tension was palpable. Marta paced back and forth, unable to stay still. The police arrived quickly, as did Don Ramon's security team, led by a man named Miguel, an expert in crisis situations. We'll find Louisa, Mrs. Marta, Miguel said with determination. We have some leads and are tracking the message's origin. Grateful but unable to contain her anxiety, Marta's mind was filled with terrifying images of what might be happening to Louisa. She couldn't afford to lose hope, but every second without news was torture. Miguel, please find her. I don't know what I'll do if something happens to her, Marta said, her voice breaking. Meanwhile, in an old warehouse on the city's outskirts, Louisa was held captive by Ricardo. He watched her confidently, sure his plan would work. But Louisa, though terrified, remained calm, remembering her mother's teachings about being strong in difficult times. "Don't try anything stupid, girl. This will all end soon if your mother does what she's told," Ricardo said coldly. Marta was on the brink of despair. With the ransom message in her mind, she moved frenetically around the mansion, looking for any information that could lead her to her daughter. Don Ramon was on the phone, talking quickly with his contacts, while Miguel's security team prepared a plan of action. "We've traced the message signal. It seems to come from an old warehouse on the city's outskirts," Miguel reported, entering the room with a map. "We need to act quickly." "Let's go," Marta said, determined. "I'm not waiting here while my daughter is in danger." Don Ramon approached Marta, putting a hand on her shoulder. "Marta, let the professionals handle this. I don't want you to get hurt." "It's my daughter, Ramon. I'm not staying here. I'm going with you." Without further discussion, Marta, Don Ramon, and Miguel got into a black SUV accompanied by several security team members. The drive to the warehouse was tense and silent, with Marta staring out the window, her mind full of worries and fears. Meanwhile, in the warehouse, Louisa sat in a dark corner, her hands tied. Ricardo watched her closely, confident his plan would work. But Louisa, though scared, held on to hope that her mother would come for her. "My mom never gives up. She'll come for me, and you'll regret doing this," Louisa said bravely. Ricardo laughed, but there was a shadow of doubt in his eyes. He knew Marta and Don Ramon were not ordinary people, and that underestimating them could be a fatal mistake. Arriving at the warehouse, Miguel deployed his team around the building. Every second counted, and the tension in the air was palpable. Marta and Don Ramon stayed close to the vehicle, watching as the security team prepared to enter. "Miguel, make sure nothing happens to Louisa," Marta said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. "I promise, Mrs. Marta. We'll go in and out quickly." With a signal, the security team stormed the warehouse, moving with precision and stealth. Marta and Don Ramon waited outside, every second feeling like an eternity. Finally, they heard sounds of struggle and shouts from inside. Adrenaline surged through their veins. Suddenly, Miguel emerged from the warehouse, carrying Louisa in his arms. Marta ran to them, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Louisa," Marta cried, hugging her daughter tightly. "I'm here, darling. Everything is okay now." Still trembling, Louisa clung to her mother. "I knew you'd come for me, Mom. I knew you would." Don Ramon joined the embrace, tears of relief in his eyes. "We're together now. No one will hurt us again." The nightmare had ended, but Marta knew the repercussions of this act of vengeance were far from disappearing. The rescue of Louisa brought a brief respite to Marta and her family, but the consequences of the kidnapping began to unfold quickly. News of the event leaked to the media, and soon, Don Ramon's mansion was surrounded by journalists and cameras. Marta, exhausted but determined, prepared to face this new storm. Don Ramon organized a press conference in the mansion's main hall. The room was packed with journalists, eager for details. Marta stood in front of the microphone with Louisa by her side, showing impressive bravery. "Today, we faced one of the darkest moments of our lives," Marta began, her voice firm though charged with emotion. "My daughter was kidnapped in an attempt to intimidate us and force us to drop charges against Alvaro and Laura. We will not give in to these cowardly acts." A murmur ran through the room. Marta continued, challenging her enemies. "To all those who think they can intimidate us, I say this: we will not stop. We will continue fighting for justice and truth. We will not be silenced." Meanwhile, in a darker part of the city, Ricardo, now in custody, felt defeated but not entirely beaten. He knew there were still those who shared his hatred for Marta and Don Ramon. From his cell, he began plotting a new plan, contacting old allies to continue his revenge. At the mansion, following the press conference, Marta and Don Ramon met with their security team and lawyers. They knew they had to take additional measures to protect themselves. "We can't let this happen again," Marta said, her determination palpable. We need to strengthen our security and stay one step ahead of our enemies. Miguel, the head of security, nodded. We're increasing surveillance and making sure every move of Ricardo and his associates is monitored. We won't leave anything to chance. Louisa, still recovering from the trauma, approached her mother. Mom, do you think this will ever end? Marta hugged her daughter, feeling her fragility and strength. We'll get through this, Louisa. I don't know when it will end, but I promise I'll always be here to protect you. That night, the family tried to return to normal, knowing the shadow of their enemies still loomed over them. Marta sat by Louisa's bed until she fell asleep, her thoughts spinning around the next steps. The atmosphere in the mansion was tense, but a renewed resolve was in the air. Marta knew the battle wasn't over and that challenges would keep coming, but she also knew that together, as a family, they could face anything. As Marta and her family tried to regain a semblance of normalcy, unexpected and devastating news shook their foundation. Due to a legal technicality and the influence of powerful allies, Laura had been released from prison. The news hit like a bolt of lightning at Don Ramon's mansion, causing a mix of shock, fear, and anger. Marta, Don Ramon, and Louisa were gathered in the living room when Don Ramon's phone rang. His expression changed drastically as he answered, reflecting a mix of disbelief and worry. Laura was released, Don Ramon exclaimed, his voice trembling with rage. That's impossible. Marta felt a knot in her stomach hearing those words. They immediately turned on the television and saw Laura leaving prison, surrounded by journalists and smiling triumphantly. This can't be happening, Marta murmured, feeling her world collapse once again. Wasting no time, Laura, with cold and calculated determination, began executing a meticulously designed plan while in prison. She knew her freedom was her last chance to destroy Marta and Don Ramon. She contacted her network and began coordinating strategic moves to attack from multiple fronts. At the mansion, security was reinforced, but fear was palpable. They knew Laura was capable of anything. That night, as everyone tried to sleep, Marta received a call on her cell phone. Hello? Marta answered, her voice reflecting exhaustion. Hello, Marta. Laura's voice was filled with venom. Surprised to hear from me? Just wanted to let you know this isn't over. It's just beginning. Enjoy every moment of peace you have left. Marta felt a chill run down her spine. She hung up the phone and ran to the living room, where Don Ramon and Louisa were awake, alerted by the security team's movements. It was Laura. She called to threaten me, Marta said, her voice shaking with contained rage. Don Ramon frowned, his mind racing. We can't let her intimidate us. We need to stay one step ahead. Let's call a meeting with our entire security team and lawyers. This time, we won't leave any loose ends. Laura, meanwhile, began deploying her plan with precision, using her network of contacts and hidden financial resources. She orchestrated a series of attacks against Don Ramon's company and Marta's foundation. Media leaks, internal sabotage, and veiled threats began to undermine the stability of both institutions. One morning, while Marta and Don Ramon reviewed the latest damage caused by Laura, Miguel, the head of security, entered with a grave expression. We have information that Laura is planning something big. We don't have all the details, but we know she's gathering dangerous people, Miguel informed. Determined not to be intimidated, Marta responded. We need to protect not only our family but also our employees and everyone who depends on us. Let's take more drastic measures. Meanwhile, Laura, in her hideout, watched with satisfaction as her plans began to bear fruit. She knew psychological warfare was as effective as any other attack, but also knew she needed a final blow, something that would completely destroy Marta and Don Ramon. That night, Marta barely slept, the weight of responsibility and fear for her family overwhelming. But amid the darkness, she found a spark of determination. She knew she couldn't let Laura win. The fight was far from over, but they were ready to face whatever was necessary. Laura's release had triggered an alarm at Don Ramon's mansion. Marta and Don Ramon knew they were up against a cunning and vengeful mind. Security measures were doubled, and the family was on high alert. Meanwhile, Laura gathered her allies, each more dangerous than the last. One afternoon, while Marta reviewed the latest security reports, she received an urgent call from Miguel. Marta, we have information that Laura has hired a group of mercenaries for a direct attack. We must prepare for the worst, Miguel said. Marta nodded, her heart racing. Do whatever it takes, Miguel. We can't let them catch us off guard. That night, the tension was palpable in the mansion. Guards patrolled the grounds, and every family member was prepared for any eventuality. Near midnight, a loud noise shattered the silence. An explosion rocked the mansion, followed by gunfire and screams. "They're here," Miguel shouted, organizing the guards to repel the attack. Marta and Don Ramon ran to the basement, where Louisa and other family members had taken refuge. Panic was in the air, but Marta stayed calm, comforting Louisa while thinking of the next step. "Don't worry, darling. We're safe here," Marta said, hugging Louisa tightly. Outside, Laura's mercenaries advanced, facing fierce resistance from the security guards. Laura, observing from a safe distance, smiled coldly, confident her plan would finally destroy her enemies. Don Ramon, armed, joined Miguel and his men in defending the mansion. Despite his age, his determination and courage were unwavering. The battle was intense, with both sides suffering losses. The mercenaries, well-trained and equipped, advanced mercilessly. Amid the chaos, Marta made a bold decision. "We can't stay here, Ramon. We need to get Louisa and the others out of the mansion. There's an escape tunnel in the basement that will take us to safety." Don Ramon nodded, knowing Marta was right. "Take Louisa and the others. Miguel and I will hold the line here." Without wasting time, Marta led Louisa and the others through the escape tunnel, a secret passage Don Ramon had built years ago for emergencies. The dark, narrow tunnel offered a path to freedom, but the fear of being discovered made every step an agony. As Marta and the others moved through the tunnel, they could hear the echoes of the battle above. Louisa, though scared, clung to her mother, her bravery strengthened by Marta's presence. "Everything will be fine, Louisa. Just keep moving," Marta whispered, trying to stay calm. At the tunnel's end, they found a hidden exit leading to a nearby forest. Marta helped everyone out, ensuring no one was left behind. Once outside, they gathered in a dark clearing, trying to catch their breath and plan their next move. Back at the mansion, Don Ramon and Miguel continued to fight valiantly, but the enemy forces were overwhelming. Miguel, seeing the dire situation, shouted to Don Ramon, "We need to retreat. We can't hold this position much longer." Don Ramon, recognizing the wisdom in Miguel's words, nodded. "All right, let's regroup with the others. We can't let Laura win." Covered in sweat, the two men began to retreat strategically, using their knowledge of the terrain to evade the mercenaries and reunite with Marta and the others in the forest. In the forest clearing, Marta, Louisa, and the rest of the family anxiously awaited Don Ramon and Miguel's return. The sounds of battle had faded, but the tension remained thick. Finally, Marta saw Don Ramon and Miguel approaching, battered but alive. "Papa!" Marta cried, running to Don Ramon and hugging him tightly. "I'm okay, Marta. We're all okay," Don Ramon responded, his voice breaking with emotion and relief. Louisa joined the embrace, feeling a spark of hope for the first time in a long time. "I knew you'd come back." Despite the exhaustion and fear, they found strength in their unity. Miguel, though wounded, was determined to protect everyone. Reunited in the forest, Marta, Don Ramon, and Miguel discussed their next move. They knew they couldn't keep running. They had to confront Laura and her mercenaries once and for all. "We need to dismantle Laura's network from the inside," Miguel said, his voice filled with determination. "I have contacts who can help us locate her allies and neutralize them. And we need to do it quickly before Laura has a chance to regroup," Marta added. "We can't let her continue." Don Ramon, though exhausted, supported the plan. "We're all in this together. Let's end this nightmare." Using Miguel's information and contacts, Marta, Don Ramon, and their security team infiltrated Laura's hideout. The place was heavily guarded, but Marta and her family were determined. In a series of strategic and precise moves, they neutralized the guards and advanced towards the hideout center. Finally, they came face to face with Laura, who awaited them with a triumphant smile. "Did you really think you could stop me?" Laura mocked, pointing a gun at Marta. But before she could act, Louisa, with surprising bravery, stepped between Laura and her mother. "Stop, Laura. We won't let you destroy us." The distraction was enough for Miguel to disarm Laura and pin her to the ground. Marta approached Laura, her eyes filled with determination and compassion. "This ends here, Laura. We won't let you continue hurting us," Marta said firmly. Laura was handed over to the authorities. This time, without technicalities or influences to save her, she was imprisoned for her crimes. Peace, though fragile, began to restore in Marta and her family's life. Back at the mansion, Marta, Don Ramon, and Louisa gathered to reflect on all they had faced and overcome. "We've been through a lot, but we've done it together," Don Ramon said, his voice full of pride. "There's nothing we can't overcome as a family." Looking at Louisa, Marta felt profound gratitude and love. "The most important thing is that we're together and safe. Nothing is more valuable than that." A few months later, a family gathering was held at Don Ramon's mansion. The foundation had flourished again, and the company had recovered. Marta and Don Ramon worked together, guided by the experience and determination forged in adversity. Louisa, now stronger and more confident, continued her studies and actively participated in the foundation, inspired by her mother's example. "Today, we celebrate not just our victory but the strength of our family," Marta said in an emotional speech. "Together, we've shown that love and justice always prevail." The united and stronger family toasted to the future, knowing that though the road had been difficult, they had emerged victorious and more united than ever. Marta and her family, after overcoming immense challenges, found the peace and stability they had longed for. Don Ramon's mansion became a symbol of hope and resilience, where each family member contributed to building a better future. In the mansion's garden, under the warm sun, Marta, Don Ramon, and Louisa sat together, enjoying a moment of tranquility. The scars from their struggle were deep, but so were their love and determination. "We've faced darkness and come out stronger," Marta said, taking Louisa's hand. "Now is the time to live fully and in peace." Smiling, Louisa replied, "Thank you for never giving up, Mom. You're my hero." With tears of pride in his eyes, Don Ramon added, "We're a family, and we always will be. Together, we can overcome anything."